Thank you, Scott. All I can do is screw this up. So, we were originally going to have a program in July by Rear Admiral Gary Rossholt, who is a Navy SEAL. In the Navy, we call them snake eaters. And we found out that we had another interesting opportunity to bring in the Commanding General of the 8th Air Force. Did I get that right, General? Who was the individual who led the planning on the strike in Iran in July, or June rather. So we're going to take advantage of the fact that he is nearby in Shreveport. Hopefully the government will be open by then, and he'll be allowed to travel TAD to come here. But so the schedules that you're going to see up here in the slide about Admiral Rossholt is a little out of date, so we'll just ask you to stay tuned. But anyway, the interesting thing about Admiral Rossholt was that he was the defense attaché at his last assignment in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, and now works for LF3 Harris on the Middle East. So he is somewhat familiar with what goes on in that part of the world. And then later in the year, as we develop the programs, we're going to go back and revisit things like cyber warfare and space warfare as part of this great power competition series. So that's Rossholt's bio. So tonight we're going to continue with the theme that began last fall, which is the great power competition that we now face with Russia and the People's Republic of China. And we're going to now talk about naval power. Guys like me went on boats, went to sea. And so this is the title is Great Power Competition, Sea Power Perspective. And it seems as if all the prognosticators are correct, and you know how accurate they can be sometimes, it's going to be in the Pacific. And so along with the ground forces and the air forces, the Navy is going to be front and center in this. And we are still preeminent in that part of the world as well as the rest of the world. The maritime domain is probably the most difficult arena to fight in, because not only do you have to deal with the air and what's on the surface of the water, but you also have to deal with what's undersea, which is submarines, and then you also have to deal with weather. And those of you who have ever been to sea will know that it's a very, very unforgiving environment. So anyway, let's go to slide 13 to catch up. There we go. So this is the Chinese aircraft carrier Fujian, and according to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the People's Republic of China has built more ships by tonnage in 2024 than the United States built since the end of World War II. That's a phenomenal number that shows you how much our shipbuilding industry has atrophied. And recently they've conducted trials on the Fujian. All the naval aviators that I know want to sell tickets to watch their first night of night traps. There's a thing on an aircraft carrier known as Vulture's Row, and it's on the island at the aft end, and for entertainment value, you can go up there and watch. Night traps, if you've never made one, I'll put the word loosely, entertaining. And as my son will tell you, he's got almost 800 traps. That's why he's got gray hair at the age of 44. Mine came from other sources because I flew helicopters. That was enough. But anyway, so the Fujian is out now doing sea trials. And if you ever see the videos put out by the People's Republic of China, they look like a U.S. aircraft carrier because they wear the same color jerseys, they have the same ballet, so to speak, that we use for flight operations. So anyway, this evening we're going to explore the capabilities of and the trials that we face in the Pacific with Rear Admiral Mike Manazir, his call sign is Nasty. And so we bring up, there he is. So here's the fun part. The Navy is a really small organization, particularly naval aviation. And at the height of the Reagan buildup, there were 600,000 people roughly in the U.S. Navy, including reservists, and less than 10,000 of us wore gold wings like I have on my shoulder, on my lapel, and that's aviators, backseaters, air crewmen. So we were a really small community. The bad news is that being a small community, everybody knows when you're really good. And the bad news is nobody knows when you're really bad, but Admiral Manazir is one of those that, or Manazir is one of those who's one of the really good guys. So at the end of this, we're gonna have questions, and I'm gonna turn it over to him in a few seconds, but you can submit questions a little differently. We have question cards on the tables. We'll write them out because we're using new technology. We're using Zoom, and we're not quite sure how to get bits of some of the stuff that we used to do in other ones to work. So fill out the question cards, we'll pick them up. General Campbell will triage them, and then I'll read them off to Admiral Manazir. And then we'll also take some questions via the microphones in the audience. Sir. Yeah. The email address, if you want to email it from your phone, is on the cards. So it makes it a little easier for those of you who like to use iPhones and stuff like that. So, without further ado, and without me trying to embarrass Manazir, I'm going to turn it over to you, sir, and you can go ahead and tell us all about Sea Power and the Great Power Competition.
Perfect. Hopefully you all can hear me. I can see you. What a wonderful looking room. Mark, am I coming through okay?
Yeah, we hear 5x5, sir. We're waiting to get your picture up here on the screen. So give us about, there we go. There you go. I like your flight jacket.
Great to see you. We're wonders of technology today. I get to join you, but unfortunately I was not able to travel this weekend, and so I'm sorry for that. But what a full room! This is awesome. I'd like to talk to you tonight about the American Carrier Strike Group, and let me give you just a little bit of my own experience. And I'm sorry if I scare the people in the front. I can kind of see the corner of my screen. I'm about 50 feet tall in your room here. That's interesting to look at, but. So I spent 36 years in the Navy. I retired in 2017. The job I had when I retired, I was the OPNAV N9. I was in charge of recommending to the Chief of Naval Operations what the Navy should buy. And then the Navy would put a budget together that I would help shepherd through the Office of the Secretary of Defense, now the Office of Secretary of War, through the President and the White House, and then over to the United States Congress, and hopefully get what I recommended, that we should have. That was my 5th tour in the Pentagon. The four tours before that, one was getting experience a long time ago in the middle of the 90s, and then the 4 tours and requirements. I spent the other 3 in naval aviation requirements in the Pentagon, and so I would defend the carrier strike group, the airplanes that were on it, bombs, bullets, people, that whole thing from the OPNAV N98 position. Operationally, I have 15 overseas deployments. All of them are 6 months, or 7.5 or 8. And I commanded USS Nimitz from March of 2007 until August of 2009. Went back to the Pentagon and went back to sea for the last time from August of 2011 until June of 2013 as the Carrier Strike Group Commander on the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. We deployed over to the Gulf through the Mediterranean, and then we were over there for quite a long time, and Admiral Gortney, who was Fleet Forces Command at the time, sent us back home after some conversation, and then right back out again in just a couple of months, less than 2 months later, after we had done some needed maintenance to the carrier and to the cruiser that accompanied us. We were right back out into the Gulf because we were going to go to war against Iran. I mean, that's what Admiral Gortney said. And so we turned right around. Now, General Mattis was the CENTCOM commander at the time, and he was relieved by President Obama, and General Austin was brought in. And the theater over there, the area right around the Arabian Gulf and all the countries there, completely depressurized. And we moved away from Iran, outside the Gulf, outside the Strait of Hormuz. And so politics kind of took the pressure out of the region. But the carriers and the Carrier Strike Group was the primary United States tool for diplomacy moving into conflict. In 2008, when I had command of Nimitz, the second deployment, we went out, that I was captain of, we went out and sat off Taiwan to make sure that the Chinese knew that when they were doing the elections in Taiwan that we were here watching. And Admiral Willard at the time was the Indo-PACOM commander, the 4-star in charge, and he told me when we came through to debrief him on the way back that
recording in progress.
We were the first line of defense in the way of China if they decided to come through the strait here. And I think you all know Admiral Paparo, who is now the current Indo-PACOM commander, always has carrier strike groups in the region. Every single time there is a carrier strike group that moves into a region in the world, it changes the balance of power. When I had command of Nimitz, I could feel it. The newspapers in the region, and we would get them all, the intelligence officer would get them all. The newspapers in the region, above the fold, every paper, Nimitz arrives. When I was carrier strike group commander of Dwight D. Eisenhower, when we moved through the Mediterranean, down through the Suez Canal, into the Red Sea, around the Bab el-Mandeb, and then up into the Arabian Gulf, the same thing happened. All of the regional press commented on the fact that the United States Aircraft Carrier Strike Group was there. The American Carrier Strike Group, centered around either a Nimitz-class carrier, which started with USS Nimitz, CVN 68, has gone all the way through the USS George H.W. Bush, CVN 77, and then the Ford-class carrier, the USS Ford, which is right now down in the Caribbean. Those two classes of ship represent, and the ships around them, represent the most potent conventional warfighting system there is in the world today. People complain about how much an aircraft carrier costs. Right now, I think a Ford costs about $13 billion. That's about what it was when I had OPNAV N98 and then OPNAV N9. That's a lot of money for one ship. But the power that the carrier has across the spectrum of warfighting, from deterrence at what we call phase 0, deterring a potential adversary from doing something, also shaping the environment through phase 1 and phase 2 to make sure nothing happens, then without changing anything, without having to bring on any extra power, move right into full combat operations day and night, all weather, which the Chinese cannot do. And I also want some popcorn and go up on Vulture's Row. We've been doing this for 100 years and it's hard. They will not be able to do it and just go, oh look, we can do this just like the Americans. That carrier is a toy. Also, it'll be on the bottom really fast along with all of its sisters if something kicks off over there, because those are the primary targets for our submarines. And you can imagine how many submarine captains want to sink an aircraft carrier. So they're drooling. If something happens over there, those carriers are going to go to the bottom. They won't be able to fight. We will, however. But the power of the CSG, the Carrier Strike Group, is the airplanes that are on top. So I have about 3,000 hours in a Tomcat, looks like that right behind me, and then kind of next to that off camera, I have about 500 hours in a Super Hornet. And I've been flying Tomcats since 1983 off of carriers. When USS Enterprise, the world's first nuclear-powered surface ship, went to sea in 1961, she had on her the most advanced aircraft that the U.S. Navy could operate off that carrier. When we put her to bed at Newport News, Huntington Ingalls, just a few short years ago, she was as relevant then as she was in 1961 because of the airplanes that were on her flight deck. Right now, the air wing on Ford and Nimitz class ships consists of 5th generation F-35s, 4th and a half or 3/4 generation F-18E and F strike fighters, EA-18G Growlers that do electronic warfare, so they affect the electronic signals of the enemy and they allow us to operate inside of somebody else's weapons engagement zone. E-2D Hawkeyes, which are the AWACS that kind of show everybody, the decision makers on the ship, where everything is in the region. They can cover more than 3 million cubic miles of airspace all the way down to either the land or the sea surface, and be able to tell people in airplanes and people, decision makers on the ships, what's going on both on the surface of the water and what's going on in the air. And then we have the MH-60 Romeo helicopters, which are a primary anti-submarine warfare airplane. We are supported by P-8s that aren't in the carrier air wing, but P-8s are ASW fixed wing. They're 737s. The Boeing company makes them. They're 737s with big anti-submarine warfare capabilities on them, and they do large area search. But the helicopters come off of the carrier and the ships assigned to the carrier and protect the carrier from submarine threats. When I was striker commander, I rode to Florida from Norfolk all the way down to Mayport, 3 days on a submarine. And I asked the captain to practice submarine tactics with me aboard, because as a striker commander, I have a couple of submarines that are attached to the carrier strike group, but I never know where they were. So and I'm not a submariner, and so I just wanted to get an idea of the tactics. He told me that the only thing he's afraid of, or the only thing a submarine captain's afraid of, and this is in training for us, and obviously for the bad guys it's bad, is 3 Romeo helicopters. They are very, very, very capable. And so taken in total, the carrier air wing on the aircraft carrier is the most powerful main battery that the United States has. Carrier strikers have been operating inside the weapons engagement zone over in the Red Sea and in the approaches around Israel and the Eastern Mediterranean. They are survivable. When I was operating in the 80s, we were always faced with surface-to-surface missile threats. We would go through, in the 90s, after Desert Storm, we went through the Strait of Hormuz, and there are surface-to-surface missiles just off the starboard side when you're going into the Gulf from Iran. So we've always faced a surface missile threat. And people get concerned that because China with a DF-21 missile can reach over 2,000 miles and a DF-26 missile can reach even farther than that, maybe even range all the way near Guam, that all of a sudden carriers aren't relevant. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the captains of your United States American aircraft carriers, we operate inside the weapons engagement zone. Now, we're not going to stay in one place, because if you sit there, you're going to be targeted. We're going to move. The neat thing about an American aircraft carrier, we do about 35 knots. 35 knots. That means you can go move around 700 miles in 24 hours. You completely change where you are. Way back in 2007, I think it was 2007, maybe the 2008 cruise. No, I think it was the 2008 cruise. I left San Diego and showed up in the Sea of Japan over there. The Chinese didn't know where we were. We came out, did carrier qualification in the Southern California op areas, shut everything off, and went 35 knots straight across, and they couldn't find us. There are classified capabilities that we use to keep our ships hidden and protected from the sensors that are over the top. In order to target an aircraft carrier or even target an American ship, there's a series of satellites that have to come together, and they cross periodically, and we know when those windows are, so we can do things to hide our emissions to make sure they don't get us. They need to use several different satellites to target the aircraft carrier. Then they have to reach all the way back into mainland China to tell them we got the aircraft carrier targeted. Now let's do some computations about whether they want to launch a missile out there. Well, meantime, the carrier is moving. And so we're gonna be able to move the carrier out of that weapons engagement zone that the Chinese will use. That kill chain, it's called a kill chain, from detection all the way to impact of a missile like that going that far takes more than 30 minutes. And so we take advantage of that kill chain time to be able to move the carrier and defend ourselves. Those are the capabilities of the American Carrier Strike Group. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's going to be easy, or that we're not going to take losses, or that we're going to have to figure out new and different ways of communicating, because as all the people who have studied this theater understand, the Chinese ability to take away our communication links, even our global positioning system, our GPS, and the other ways we navigate, can change the way that we're going to be able to fight this fight. That is the most difficult part. I don't train with current American carrier strike groups. I've been out of it for too long now, but I know based on the training that I'm hearing about and talking to the people that are out there leading, that they are at the front edge of learning how to fight. I should say, not learning how to fight, the front edge of training how to fight a fight where they don't have all those tools that you would have in a normal situation where nobody's shooting at you. So, as we think about the carrier strike group moving in there, people think about their survivability. We have that maneuverability that would make sure we're survivable. Think about the cost across all of the spectrums of warfighting. So we don't have to buy extra things to be able to move across all the spectrums of warfighting. USS Abraham Lincoln, probably, gosh, over a decade ago now, and I can't remember when it was, 07, 08, somewhere in there, they did humanitarian assistance disaster relief with the earthquake and tsunami in Indonesia. And so even when you're not fighting or you're not positioning to change a region, we have the assets to move in and without changing anything on the carrier, be able to do critical humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. So the carrier strike group and all of its attendant capabilities really do cover all of the phases of conflict or deterrence that America will want to enter into, and again affect the regions. Probably the last thing I want to talk about, and I'll turn it over to Mark because I really do want to get to your questions and talk about cool things, is we talked about the relevance of the air wing and how that air wing stays relevant through having capabilities and new airplanes. There is an airplane that the Navy is just about to make a decision on with the Office of the Secretary of War. It's called FAXX. It is a 6th generation fighter. It would be a generation capability above the F-35 5th generation fighter. By the way, let me describe a little bit of how the airplanes work. And so if we go over there, we're looking kind of ahead. If you're looking at me and I'm the bad guy, you're going to have F-35s closest to me because the F-35 and its stealth capabilities can get closer to the threat and can determine who to shoot at. So the bad guy airplanes in the middle of all the noise and everything that's out there kind of towards me, and then back behind closer to you, there'd be F-18 fighters that are covered by the Growlers, and they've got a whole bunch of missiles on them, and we are able to move targeting information from the F-35 to the F-18, and those F-18s can shoot from a little farther back, and then they can retire. The 6th generation airplane, this FAXX, will be able to go deeper, down closer to the threat than the F-35. It will have critical capabilities that are going to be beneficial to the air wing and even better than the F-35, be able to go extremely fast, extremely far, and then get in and out and be able to affect not only ground targets, but also air-to-air targets. And so it's going to be additive to the F-35s. And the capabilities of the F-18 and the E-18G are going to come up software-based. We continue to enhance capability, and then the E-2D is also going to have advanced capability as we learn more and more and more about the advanced threats. And so the ships and airplanes that you all buy, that we all buy with our taxpayer dollars in the United States Navy and as well as the Air Force and the Army, are not sitting constant. So when you buy an airplane like a Tomcat or an F-18, it's always being upgraded with the latest capabilities, and generally we're able to put software inside the weapon systems to be able to upgrade those capabilities. The competition for the FAXX is probably down to 2. It's a Boeing and Northrop Grumman. Those designs are mature, and now the Pentagon needs to decide who they want to pick and then move forward. I would say that airplane is probably in the air wing a couple of years from now. Last point I want to make, it is broadly accepted that the threat window for China to decide to do something in the South China Sea, which typically sounds like invade Taiwan, and all the war games ever participated in, the war with China kicked off because they invaded Taiwan. So that's the flashpoint everybody talks about. But generally accepted that the beginning of 2027 is the beginning of the threat window. Admiral Davidson was the Indo-PACOM commander at the time, and so it's often called the Davidson window. So the beginning of 2027 through 2032 is when American intelligence thinks that President Xi is going to make some kind of a move. And so that's kind of what we're targeting in the United States Navy to get capabilities ready to go. Me, as a retired guy, I'm thinking we're behind a little bit. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens as we go through 2026, if we ever get a budget signed, and be able to buy equipment that is going to be able to keep the carrier strike group and other forces that will deploy over in the Western Pacific high enough so that if a conflict happens with China, you know, we'll be able to do what we need to do for the objectives of the United States. Make no mistake though, whenever a conflict kicks off, one, carriers will be in the region before the conflict kicks off, and two, we're going to go fight with whatever we have. And I have complete trust and faith in not only our equipment, but most importantly, the training and capabilities of our sailors, officers, pilots, soldiers, sailors, airmen, everybody. I've been so amazed, and you would be very proud of the capabilities that are in your military right now. Whatever your background is in the room, it's amazing. I'm about 8 minutes from the United States Naval Academy here in Annapolis, Maryland, which is where I'm talking to you from. And I get a chance to meet the midshipmen, and the ones that come in every year as plebes are shockingly amazing. They are incredible. And so I tell people not to worry about the capabilities of our men and women in uniform. They're very, very, very good, the best in the world. And yes, the Chinese have not worked a carrier for 100 years like we do, but the biggest thing we have is our training. We train better and we're better prepared than anybody in the world. That is our secret sauce, and that's why we're going to prevail. So with that, Mark, I'll turn it back over to you, and maybe there'll be some questions. We can get into some deeper stuff, or if not, I'll let you go back to have dessert, ladies and gentlemen. But it's great.
No, there will be questions. Since you're in this world, the question is, how will new startups like Palantir, Anduril, and the new technology change the strategic posture of the U.S. versus the People's Republic of China? And are there any game changers on the horizon?
The neat thing about, ladies and gentlemen, I work for a company called Hadrian, and we build highly automated factories. We are partnered with Anduril and Palantir. Anduril, Palantir, and Hadrian are kind of viewed as the three top non-traditional companies. And so I've been in the Pentagon and seen the Secretary of the Navy. I've seen the Deputy Secretary of War, Stephen Feinberg, and my CEO, Chris Power, has been briefing both the Secretary of the Navy and the DepSec War on our capabilities. There are two things that the non-traditionals bring to this sort of environment right now. The very first one is speed, that's obvious. The second one is private investment. And so from the venture capital and the private equity world, there's a lot of private investment focused on national security. Hadrian is heavily venture capital backed. You know from the, watching announcements and things like that, that Palantir and Anduril are also backed by private investment. That allows government investment to go on top of private investment when private investment is used to draw down risk. The second thing that I talked about, or the first one I noted, was speed. So I worked for the Boeing company for 8 years. When I retired in 2017 until this last Christmas holidays, 8 years worth of connecting the U.S. Navy and Boeing. The defense industrial base, the process that builds programs for national defense is very, very mired in process and contracts and deliverables and zero risk. Zero risk. Now these programs, like the F-18 that Boeing makes, like the F-35 that Lockheed makes, like the E-2D that Northrop Grumman makes, they're all based on this relationship with the Department of Defense, so in our case, the Department of the Navy, in the Pentagon, going through Office of Secretary of Defense, and then the prime prime contractor. What has happened over the years is in order to steward taxpayer resources, we have taken all the risk out of building high-end platforms. When we get a contract to build a high-end platform, that thing's got to be perfect. The neat thing is that you can be sure there are lots of people that make sure our taxpayer dollars, you're getting what you pay for. The problem is making something perfect instead of 85% good takes a huge amount of effort and cost, and the requirements are really, really tough because of what we build. And so that ends up slowing everything down. And so the process, it takes a long time. The F-35 requirement, the F-35 was an idea 15 years before the first one hit the ramp and came out there and started flying. And so it takes us a long time to put that together. Fast companies that are coming up with private investment, we're willing to take risk and fail. And so that fail and learn something. You guys, I think you probably watched SpaceX, space capsules blow up in training or in testing. And Elon and the team, they all cheer. They learn something every time they fail. So unscheduled disassembly or something like that, blam, the thing blows up. And within a couple of weeks, they're back on the launch pad shooting another rocket. That would never happen in a traditional prime contractor. I will tell you, based on personal experience, that the Secretary of the Navy and the Deputy Secretary of War are putting the screws to the prime contractors to see how we can get them out from underneath the processes they are following. Because the defense industrial base that includes the government side and the commercial side is locked in this sort of cold molasses thing where there's just no inertia to move. And so new companies like this, will be able to go faster. Game changing. I think the second part of that, Mark, was game changing capabilities or something like that. What was the last part of that?
How does it change the strategic posture and the game changes on the horizon? And you also left out cost in terms of speed.
Correct. Yeah. So speed and cost, right? So time and people cost a lot of money, and so if you don't go fast, you're probably going to spend a lot of money with this. I'll tell you what is really true though, even in the traditional primes. Our innovation, the capabilities we have are eye-watering. Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, all the big ones, and then of course as people come up with better ways to use AI, machine learning, and the new non-traditionals like Palantir, Anduril, and Hadrian using AI and machine learning, we're really good. The innovation center of the world is still the United States. And there's no lack of innovation. So the capabilities that we're putting out there are phenomenal. And this sixth generation fighter, when it gets out there, is going to be so much more capable than the Tomcat that I flew through the 80s and 90s. It's amazing. I mean, generational, completely changing. So again, and you won't hear about these game-changing things because they're classified. And so the ability of that sixth generation fighter to get even closer to the enemy in not only the infrared region, but also the radio frequency region and the optical region. So you pretty much have to make the airplane, basically invisible. And it's amazing what we can do. So the game-changing stuff is coming from the defense industrial base. The problem with the traditional companies is it takes too long and costs too much money to do it. So the non-traditionals led by the administration are coming in to be able to figure out a way to get stuff there faster.
Okay, I want to change gears on you here. And the question, I'm going to modify the question here, but what's the truth about Venezuela having thousands of Russian-made missiles, and is it a threat to the U.S. Navy ships that are offshore today?
I'm not exactly sure what Venezuela has in their, we call it an order of battle. Because they are land-based, the ships will be able to choose where they sail in order to deny the threat from those surface to ship missiles and be able to defend against them. We didn't really cover the news didn't really specify the kinds of things that were shot at the ships over in the Red Sea that were fighting the Houthis over there. They got some pretty good technology though, and there was never a hit on an American ship. And so the defenses from the ships, the defenses from the airplanes, were able to protect that. You're going to see the same thing off of Venezuela. They do not have high-end offensive capability. And so we should be able to be just fine should they decide to go in and do something. The other thing, just if you just kind of close your eyes and listen to the news and see what's going on like I do, if there is a decision to attack land targets, we will be able to defend against the capabilities there and be able to get into those land targets, I have no doubt, because that country does not have high-end capability like some of our peer adversaries would. And we put people in those categories would be China, Russia somewhat, those two. Other than that, there's not a capability that can defend against what we get out of American carrier strike group.
Okay, so I'm going to paraphrase actually 4 cards that really are along the same lines, all have to do with the PRC. So question 1 is explain how the PRC would use hypersonic missiles to target a carrier, using especially ones that can maneuver. Then also, how does the PRC's demographic crash over its one-child policy going to affect its capabilities? And then the last one, if you are President Xi, and you're now committed to invading Taiwan or conquering Taiwan, and you're going to lose a lot of face if you don't do it, what do you tell him as an advisor?
Cool. Those are great questions.
Yeah, I love this.
I know. So a hypersonic missile, I'm just going to be very kindergarten with you guys. A hypersonic missile goes greater than Mach 6. That's once it's launched. And so once it's launched, the time it takes to go from the launch point to the target is 3 to 4 to 5 times shorter than a conventional missile. We will detect that launch, and you have a short period of time to do something about it during that time. It is true that these missiles that the Chinese have designed that are hypersonics do some funny things in the terminal phase, which is right before they're going to hit you. They can maneuver at speed, they can spiral, they can make feints that defending missiles would turn to lead them, and then the hypersonic missile goes away, so it's very difficult. So it's a difficult problem once the missile is launched. We talked about the kill chain. There is no difference from, we call it left of bang. So there is no difference of all the steps it takes in order to pull the trigger and launch that hypersonic missile. And so we spend a lot of time in the United States targeting the stuff that's left of bang and being able to make sure that the system that would target the carrier does not get the targeting information to launch the hypersonic missile. Because from a hypersonic missile standpoint, once you launch it, you're kind of in a last-ditch maneuver. When I was flying Tomcats, if an airplane got behind me and shot a missile, now I was in my last-ditch maneuver to me and the missile were fighting instead of me and the airplane. We don't want to get in that stage. And so that's kind of how we're defending against those. The one-child policy is really interesting in China demographically. They are going to suffer from that and I can't remember what the dates are. The person that asked the question has probably got a really good answer in the room, but sometime in the next 20 years or so, all of a sudden their population and the ones that can work and go into the military is going to decline precipitously because they've done this to their own demographics. And so some of our decision makers and the people I've talked to from a policy standpoint are kind of, if we can avoid conflict out to that point, they're going to get to a stage where they're, that's going to start to affect a whole bunch of stuff in their country, economy, military, that whole thing. I'm glad the question of Xi and Taiwan was about face. because it's kind of interesting. They recoiled when Putin decided to roll into the border in Ukraine. The world reaction to Putin really caught the Chinese by surprise. They are hugely sensitive to public affairs and how they look in the world. Hugely sensitive. And so if she or his military advisors, civilian advisors were thinking about, hey, it's about time to go to Taiwan right now, they really got knocked back a little bit with the world's reaction with Russia invading Taiwan. If I was talking to President Xi, I would tell him to make a deal with President Trump that gives President Trump something if President Trump allows Taiwan to be just kind of back into China again without firing a shot. The way that the Chinese leader saves face is he doesn't invade Taiwan. Taiwan voluntarily comes back. Now, how that's done, I have no idea. What President Trump would trade for that, I have no idea. But what I would do is I would talk to Xi, and I would do a whole bunch of intelligence gathering about the way that this administration is acting in the world, and I would attempt to use some kind of a maneuver that would allow the United States to not meet its treaty obligations to Taiwan. The interesting part about Taiwan, of course, is a company called TSMC makes all of the semiconductors that the world uses. If Taiwan gets overrun, everybody's going to have a problem. If Chinese takes over Taiwan, then they're going to get TSMC chips and nobody else is going to get those chips. And so strategically, Taiwan is kind of a problem. And so I would be recommending to President Xi, if I was on his side, and I, of course, am vehemently opposed to that country, and so it's a difficult question to answer. And I would say, hey, try to make a deal with President Trump. You got to find something that President Trump would value, or his administration would value, and allow the Taiwanese to kind of go over that way. There are factions in Taiwan that do favor reunification. And so they're not, 100% of them are not all supportive of being free, although the majority of them are. And so, like I said in my preamble, most of the conflicts that I've wargamed over the years with China start with an invasion of Taiwan. President Xi is very patient. The Chinese strategy is long. It's a long cycle strategy. We tend to be a little shorter minded. And so I think that they would probably try to come up with something that avoids them invading Taiwan and they still get Taiwan back in the fold. But that's what I would recommend to President Xi.
Okay, I'm going to do the last one from the cards. I'm going to turn this over to the audience. So, how long do you think it is going to be before the carrier wing is a mix of manned and unmanned aircraft?
Great question. The Navy has bought, and the Boeing company is designing, the MQ-25 unmanned refueling airplane, or uncrewed refueling airplane. It has already proven its capability to refuel airplanes. It has already proven its capability to be controlled from the ground and from another airplane. It has refueled 4 different kinds of airplanes from the air wing. And I think, and I've left the Boeing company, of course, and I don't know what the current schedule is, but I think they're going to start doing carrier operations with the MQ-25 next year in 2026. And so you'll see an unmanned, uncrewed airplane crossing the ramp of a carrier. And so I think you're going to see a mix of those MQ-25s along with the crewed airplanes that are, the unmanned or manned airplanes that are out on the carrier strike route, probably in 2027 in any numbers at all. And as designs continue to go forward, when you're able to connect an unmanned airplane like an MQ-25 with an F-18, an F-35, and E-2D, those are 3 different primary contractors using that technology. Now you know that you can shift that command capability to any other kind of unmanned airplane. And so you'll see the unmanned airplanes start to proliferate proliferate, and you'll see more of them on the flight deck. I think I've already seen some changes in the complexion of the carrier strike group. They're pushing some F-18Es and Fs into the same squadron and reducing the numbers a little bit to make room for the MQ-25 to come aboard and be able to get those capabilities there. You can't just add airplanes to the carrier's deck because you run out of room. And so you'll see a shift in manned-unmanned. The other question I get all the time, especially when I go to Pensacola and talk to the flight students down there, they're like, Admiral, are we gonna have any airplanes to fly? Oh, yes, sir. You're gonna be flying airplanes for the next 60 years. So we're gonna have still manned airplanes, and the way we're gonna use unmanned is less humans, more airplanes. So imagine if I took off in an F-18 single seat or an F-35 single seat, and right behind me, 3 unmanned wingmen took off, and 2 of them have sensors, and 1 of them has wall-to-wall AMRAAMs or medium-range missiles, and they all fly out, and they join on me because they're programmed that way. And so I fly out, and maybe I get close to the battle or the line that I want to operate in, and I hit a button, and it's all programmed in, and the 3 wingmen push out, and they're all 25 miles from me and 25 miles from each other, and so I have 100 miles of battlefront with 1 human. And the way that we operate them, you got a screen in your airplane, and you're basically looking at that airplane just like he's a sensor of yours, and there's already mission orders that are entered into that airplane on a PCM CIA card. And so you can say, hey, go to point A, orbit, report back anything you see, enter, and that airplane will go do that. The airplane will say to you, hey, I need gas. And you'll go refuel, dink, and it'll go back and go find a tanker and go refuel somewhere. When it's done, it comes back to you, reports back in, and goes, hi, I'm back, I've got a bunch of gas, I've got a whole bunch of weapons. You go to point Bravo, enter, and the airplane will go out there. That's the capability that we're building. We've already done all of that in labs. That's already been done. We already have the comms links that make those things work. And so those capabilities are, so we'll just get more and more companies building unmanned air vessels, unmanned surface vessels, and unmanned undersea vessels. You're gonna see a mix. I think in numbers, probably 2027. You'll hear a lot more about it as we go through 2026. It'll be in the news, they'll be in defense reports, there'll be at different defense trade shows and stuff, people showing their wares.
Great, okay, so now we're gonna shift gears and take questions from the audience. So if you got a question, raise your hand. I'll direct one of the young airmen with a microphone. And, okay, is that an Army uniform in the back? Sure. Okay, just before you begin, no speeches, just fire away with the question.
Sir, hello, Colonel Green, U.S. Army. Thank you for your awesome comments. And my question is more as a father, because I have 3 sons in the Navy. Yes, I failed as an Army officer.
Go Army!
Yes, sir. And one is in your special units he's there right now. So as a father, I'm more concerned. But I'm a little confused or need clarity. Like, if you're saying we're going to put their carriers to watery graves very quickly, and President Trump's still in office in 2027, is it really a legit threat? I mean, I don't understand. I've just did 90 days in US PACOM too, so I know our capabilities, so I don't view them, they can want all they want. I just can't see it actually come to fruition, at least in 2027. So just wanted a little more clarity on that for your comments, sir. Thank you.
You mean, sorry, Colonel, you mean their carrier capability and whether they're a threat that we need to sink?
Yeah, like why would they invade Taiwan when you're saying within hours they would be in the water or on the floor?
No, I think that's right. I think we will signal that their carriers, which they value very much, are at risk. And I think they will understand that. They're getting better at anti-submarine warfare. They're not very good, and their submarines are noisy enough that we can locate them. So their submarines are definitely a threat to our carriers, and they understand that our submarines are a big threat to their carriers. I can't do justice here to what it would take for President Xi to invade Taiwan, to set up everything he needs to set up and make sure that his risk calculus is going to work. He, in order to do that, is going to have everything kind of working his way, including the placement of his aircraft carriers in order to do that so he doesn't risk his forces. I've always thought that if President Xi makes the decision to launch a missile at the United States aircraft carrier and kick this thing off, the world has changed. He's going to get the full-throated power of American joint force, and I think that's something that he has to consider, and I think he does. I don't think this I don't think this decision is an easy one for him to make. But I think that given that he can fight at time of his choosing, and so can we want to help make sure that there is enough deterrence, which would be your carriers are under threat. We are going to be there with 6 or 7 American carrier strike groups in order to avoid this. We are, as you know, in the public news, we are helping to arm Taiwan, so it's going to be very, very tough to come across that strait. But to your point, Xi's calculus for when he decides to take that thing is going to be when he decides that the risk is low enough that he can succeed. And I think that as he's watching the American way of war, which is to push a bunch of equipment over first and then flow forces, he might think that he can do a sort of a lightning strike and then go, oh, I'm done now. And now we're going to have to figure out a way to either get him off the island or start shooting at them when they've stopped shooting. So I think it's a really tough problem. Good question, though.
Any other questions? I'm in as a before writer. No, I got the mic. Someone else that get me in back there.
All right. I'm Houston Hill, and I'm in Civil Air Patrol down in Waco. And my #1 question right now is if the connection between Russia and China is a threat to the USA.
What a great question, Houston, and thanks for being in the Civil Air Patrol. That is just awesome. There's 2 things about the Civil Air Patrol. One, it's flying, which is pretty cool. Second, it's a great unit to learn military discipline in, and so I applaud you for joining that. You know, it's very interesting. We in Washington, D.C., the decision makers always look for alignment between China and Russia. And we also look for alignment between China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. Those 4 countries. Because of where those countries are situated, if they get together and start to push combined force at the United States, that's a pretty significant strategic problem. And so there have been a couple of instances. I think there was one off of Alaska where I think Chinese fighters were escorting Russian reconnaissance airplanes, which I've never seen before. And so we look at those with great concern because if you get those countries which are aligned against the United States kind of operating together, they can fill each other's weaknesses. China has basically built out their armed forces with Russian kit. And so Russian capabilities and being able to, to push more capability into China to be able to raise their capability is of concern to us. Iran and North Korea always participate and add capability there. So it just heightens the capability of the force we'd be facing. And so we're always watching with great interest when those things happen. It is a good worry. We see it, our decision makers see it. Difficult to do much about it besides kind of watch and see what capabilities they're bringing, but it is a concern, and you've highlighted a good concern. That was a long answer to, yes, it's a concern, but thanks for asking that question. It's a really good strategic one.
Hey, sir. Since the Ukraine war and their ability to basically destroy the Russian Navy in their ports, how does it, when you start looking at the Okinawa, our seaports at Okinawa and Japan, and you got New Zealand, Australia, and all the other SeaTac countries, how does that give the Navy a pucker factor?
Yeah, huge pucker factor. So everybody in the room will realize the Ukrainians do not have a Navy, and they put the vaunted Russian Navy on the Black Sea seabed. with drones. And so there was very great interest in drone capabilities, counter drone capabilities, and being able to field those capabilities and the defenses that go with them. We're seeing a whole bunch of UAVs, so aerial drones in Ukraine being used, little tiny ones too with great effect, as you've seen, and of course those unmanned service vehicles, which are doing great things also in the Black Sea. So it's concerning. Technology is moving in that direction. I'm not aware of everything that we're doing, but we're doing a lot to either build drones or build counter drone capabilities. I'll also tell you that even when I was operating Nimitz way back in '07 in the Persian Gulf, the Arabian Gulf, the Iranians operated speedboats packed with explosives that were unmanned. Now there were several suicide boats too, but they fielded and ran unmanned boats that had gigantic explosives in them that would put a hole in the side of an aircraft carrier. And we were always watching for those things. And so the tactics and the strategies to go against the small boat threat is what we call it. Those are being developed as we speak. Like Houston's question on CAP with the two countries getting together, on a tactics side, this is something that we're really looking at because we're so used to a conventional way of war, and now we're seeing a lot of unconventional capabilities coming to the fore. The good news is we've got a lot of great people, Americans, over in Ukraine, learning a heck of a lot from what the Ukrainians are doing, and we'll be able to transfer that technology over with where we are right now. But that's a big threat. I think ports is a great point. If it was naval forces at sea, we would use distance and space as a defensive layer or perimeter. If you've got a port that's got critical capabilities there, you're going to have to figure out physical barriers. Like we had submarine pens and or submarine nets and stuff in World War II to protect port facilities. You're going to have to probably come up with something like that.
Thank you. We unfortunately have far more questions than we have time. So Scott, you want to do the last one?
Admiral, I'll tell you what, I'm going to move over here so at least you see who you're talking to. I don't know if I get on camera here. Well, maybe that's not going to work. Oh yeah, there I am.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Okay. First of all, let me say on behalf of everybody that's gathered here, you have been a rock star. You have been above and beyond here. We've done this for 4 years. This is our 20th anniversary doing this tonight. And I don't know as anybody, yes, you can hear the applause in the back.
Thanks.
So, that said and done, with all that you've shared with us, I'm a little scared that I even want to walk out of this building tonight. What's out there? And as you said many times here today, we're in a much different world than the one that you were in when you retired, the one that we're in even a year ago. It's a whole different world that we're a part of right now. So that said and done, I just wondered what you'd tell every one of us to share with friends, with family, with our communities, with anybody that we might know, and certainly with ourselves when we go home tonight. What's the take home that you want us to share with everybody that we know and to keep in our minds, in our hearts, as to where we're going in the future? When you go to bed tonight, you put your head on that pillow. I'm kind of curious as to what you're thinking about and what you're most concerned about as to what lies ahead as we move forward here the rest of this year in 2025. And thank you again for your service. But just your thoughts on that question. What comes to mind?
Thank you. It's a great closing question, and I've so much enjoyed being here, and I want to thank everybody in the room for their service as well. I completely enjoyed my 36 years. I got to do such fun things, drove ships, flew airplanes, some of those at the same time, so that was pretty cool. Hey, listen, everybody. I share your concern with the uncertainty that is in the current environment, that just comes from so many threats around the world, and sort of the things that are happening in our country right now, the divisions, of course, we're shut down and all that kind of stuff. And I, as a taxpayer, want to see the government open back up, and as a former military member who did go to work under orders in 2 shutdowns, not getting paid, and then got paid by the Congress later on, I have empathy for the families that are being affected right now, and for anybody in the room, I'm sorry. From a military standpoint, so I sleep extremely soundly. I have served under this many administrations, Republican and Democratic, and it always cycles. And I've seen so many things cycle back and forth that I will tell you that periods like this will pass. If we reflect on the history of the United States, we might be in unprecedented times from different points of view, but we've been in crisis a lot worse than this before, and we come through the other side. From a military standpoint, I cannot reassure you enough. We are the very best in the world. In the world. And so, I mean, something material like $850 billion of defense budget pays for a lot of stuff, and the things that we have are exquisite. But I will also tell you that I know from personal classified experience that all the domains that we fight in or potentially fight in, cyber, space, undersea, on the sea, and in the air, are not at risk. We are very, very, very good. And while we might decry the state of the economy or the state of manufacturing, which is what I'm focused on in my company in the United States, I have zero doubt that this country will come up underneath the military, and we will prevail when it comes time for us to use military force. I'm impressed with our sailors, soldiers, airmen, and Marines every turn. I'm impressed with our capabilities. We have the best training in the world. We have the best capabilities in the world, bar none. We always hear about the bad guys and how good they are. We don't hear about how good we are. Even when I was briefed, I would go over to the National Security Agency when I was my very last job, and they would brief me on the capabilities of countries around the world and the threat stuff, and I would say, you know, so here's a couple of countries that are up and to the right in their capability and their, you know, what they're doing, and I'd say, well, where are we? And they'd go, oh yeah, we're over here. And I'm an American admiral. They won't even tell me where we are, but it's up here. We are the best. So I would say that, you know, if you tend this way, I would pray for our country. I would pray for the you know, see if we can get a lot less division. We get people talking to each other. That we can get to decision making and community and caring about each other a lot more than we're doing now. There's just too much fear in our country. That's what I want to go away. There shouldn't be this much fear. We're better than this, and I think that's the only thing that makes me uncertain with that awesome final question. From a military standpoint, oh my gosh, no, we're good. We're really good. And so if something does happen and we have to you know, bow up against somebody, that's going to work just fine. But I would encourage everybody in your capability to speak up or vote or say something if something's not going the way that you think it ought to go. And you know, politics aside, you know, we gotta push back together again and bring this country forward like we have over the last couple of decades. I think that's the only thing that worries me is the division and the vitriol that's in our country right now. I want that to go away. I don't lead by fear. I lead through empathy and from my heart. I've never led with a title. I've always led by trying to be a really good human and with other people, and that's what I want to start doing that a lot more in our country. But I've enjoyed this very much, Mark. Thanks very much, everybody.
Okay, so Scott, why don't you take over? We want to thank you, Admiral, for being with us. We're going to do the 50-50 raffle, and also all the when we get done, all the ROTC, JROTC, and ROTC cadets, please.